Okay, so I just got done drilling out the ball joint. I needed to do those while I was in here, so I figured it'd be easier if I put the engine back in. What I got here is probably not advisable, but what you need to do is you need to get the transmission to rock so you can kind of get the engine mated on the dowels before it falls in, hits the lower cross member. I screwed this up last time. As a result, that bottom bolt got bumped up, and so I had to beat it back into submission to stop the oil leak. So I'm trying it this way. Again, probably not advisable because I'm putting a lot of pressure on the bushing that's inside here. But I kind of just, it's not too much weight. I just lift it up with my hands and kind of put this bar in place, block of wood, to just get it angled the right way. So I'm going to swing it around and plug it in. By the way, if you're doing the case halves, you will probably not be able to get that one apart. I tried and tried and tried, and I could not get that sucker to open up. You can see the bolt's pretty much gone. But you can take this thing off as an assembly. So if you take off the flange bolts there, come around and take off that hardware, use some heat, and that actually came free. Or you can unbolt it from the lower crossover there as well. And then the whole thing came away as one big assembly. And that was much easier. One last thing I want to show you is these crossover pipes are unobtainium. You can't really buy them anywhere that I've found. Used junkyard ones, they're going to be no better shape. Mine rotted out right here, obviously, and then this bend right here. So what I did is I cut the bad section out. I used a crimping tool to make a bead, kind of like this one here. It looks almost exactly like that when I was done. And then put some of the silicone hose in there, and that seems to be working pretty good. They're pretty close to the exhaust, so that's why I went with the silicone. I figured live longer maybe until I can find some new ones. But yeah, they are nearly impossible to find. Yep. So I got the bolts torqued back in. Like I said, I went with higher grade. These are 12.9 grade. They're M9, no, they're M8 by 1.25 pitch metric bolts. I torqued these to, I think, 31 foot-pounds, maybe a little over. I'd have to go look. I'll put it down when I put the bolt size link in there. Like I said, the factory ones are super cheesy, and I don't know if I would trust reusing them. I reused all of the bottom end bolts when I resealed the case. It seems like most people said you could, but these ones were super cheesy. But yeah, it's all back together now. And this is an easy way here to keep your crank from rotating. You just stick a screwdriver in between the block and one of the holes in the flex plate. These are those two bolts I was talking about when we pulled it apart. Like I said, I just kind of leave them dangling in here. They don't hurt anything, and they're kind of a beast to get in there. So they're already anti-seized up, and they'll be waiting and drop on top of them. They're nearly impossible to get through. And by the way, if you ever lose hardware, it's probably where it ends up. There's a little pit there. You can see all the little idle air control nuts I've lost over the years. What you got to do is you got to get the starter nose past the top of the transmission before you run out of clearance down here. So you can see by having it angled up, I can still have it kind of dangling over the cross member. And I should be able to push it back onto the guide pins on the trans before I drop it down finally into the cradle. Let's see if I can get it the rest of it. A little bit more. Okay. I need to go down just a little bit more. Almost there. That's what this tray get line up. Yeah, so that's the trick. I got that bolt in and started. I was able to start these two at the top. Kind of gave her a wiggle and a jiggle. She's seated on the pins. You can see I'm not contacting the pan yet. So I was able to slide back. Now I can take my blocks of wood out and then put that mount back in, and should be able to wrap it up, get it ready to go back in the car. So it took some wiggling and finagling, but I finally got that mount back in place. Got it kind of loosely bolted to the transmission and the engine. And then I came around and got this one. It's just kind of sitting in place, but the back on the way to the K-member now, so I think I'm just going to try to bolt it all back together, and then show you how it goes back in the car. I got to finish working on the other ball joint too, so that's all pretty boring stuff. So I'll finish putting this back together, and then I'll show you how I put it back into the car. First I grind off the head as best I can with just a cut-off wheel, and then eventually till you can see pretty much the center of it. Center pinch it. I always start with like a 1/4 inch bit. Yeah, I go maybe 2/3. through. And I switched to, I don't know, two, 3 sizes up. And hog out the hole. So I bottom out on the pilot. Then I'll take one that's the right size. I'll just kind of chamfer the edges so I can take off the head. I don't really want to drill with it so much as just make sure there's almost no material holding it on still. And then a punch, a hammer. You can see it's folding up and collapsing. That's what you want. There she goes. All done. That's it. Time for a new one. Alright. So I lifted it back up with the hoist. Sorry for the mess. Got it up on the jack stands. It's actually resting on the jack stands. I only leave the hoist there so it's like a safety catch sort of thing because I don't trust those jack stands when they're up that high. And I did disconnect the hoist and then kind of scooted her under there and then immediately reconnected it. Again, I don't like it hanging this high up, but you can take off, there's normally like a vacuum canister here, and that'll give you plenty of room to just kind of skirt her in right through there. And yeah, you just want to kind of make sure that you're centered up. I'm probably going to have to move it this way some and make sure that you got to kind of be careful when you get over on that side to guide everything kind of around all the brake lines and whatnot. And yeah, so I'm gonna lower it back down, get it kind of lined up, and then probably call that for a day. I've been working on this for 2 days straight now, off and on, and yeah, it's a lot of work. But it's all back together, everything's torqued down. I had to go chase some wires on it too, which I didn't bother filming. I had this power steering switch fault that I wasn't able to make go away. Turned out there was a broken wire underneath where that wire turns and goes under by the heater hose there. There was a broken wire in there, so hopefully I got that one. And then I had a bad EGR too. Let me show you these. They're actually pretty easy to diagnose. I bought it just to shotgun the part at it, but turns out if this don't move, sheeb foobar, and yeah, you can kind of get a little squish out of it, but it doesn't really move. I heard people cleaning them, but the new one was like $30 or something. So, I don't know. But the new one, this plunger goes in and out. This one's completely stuck. Hopefully that's my issue. So, yep, there we go. Lowered it down. I had it at, I call them stops. Had it at 9 stops on the jack stands. Now it's down to 4. And I'll probably go a little lower before I hook it up to the engine. You can see you get awfully close in the front there. So I'll probably have to, you kind of have to like lower, adjust, lower, adjust, lower, adjust. But I've had it for today, so I'm gonna call it a night. But hopefully only maybe a couple more days and have it back together. But she's getting there finally. Okay, I got the jack stands bottomed out now, and you can see it's still quite a ways down. But I think I'd be able to get my crane across there and hook it to it. So it's probably the low as I need to go. I like as low as I can get, generally. When I used to do this with a Cavalier, I used to do it with jacks, so I just lower the body down almost all the way onto the cross member, and then just jack it up, and that worked pretty good. This thing's just so heavy and awkward, I have to have the crane on it to lift it in and out. But it's still pretty controlled as long as you take it easy and slow. So yeah, it's getting there. Thanks for watching. So what I've done is I've jacked up the subframe off my dollies, pulled those out, and I got these 6x6 chunks, and I just got them kind of centered under the K-member as narrow as I can get them, so I can get the engine hoist legs in there. The dollies are out, and that gives me enough room to kind of maneuver the crane over the top of the engine. So now I can start hooking it up to the leveler and start getting ready to lift it into position, which is kind of a slow, tedious process. But before I do that, I want to make sure all the harnesses are kind of tucked up in the right spots. Make sure like the battery cable is routed up here. Ooh, I gotta connect that. Make sure I do anything down here. It's very difficult to get to once it's in the car. Luckily I got the rad out still, I can get to a lot of it, but it's better to have it kind of routed first and then bring it up. And then I'll make sure, bring the engine harness up top and start making sure I got everything. It gets super tight back between here and the block when you're pulling the engine in. Last time I did this, I actually took this off. Coil pack. It's only got about 6 to 10 millimeter bolts hold it in. I left it on when I pulled it back out. It seemed to be fine. I left it on when I put it back in last time. Seemed to be fine. So just gonna stay again. It seems to work. You just gotta be careful. You don't run into the heater box or knock the heater hose off, the heater drain thing. But yeah, start pulling it back together into a car shape again. One more monkeying around with the engine or the car 6 feet in the air. Be a lot easier. Doesn't help. Really have to come this way a little bit. Everything on the driver's side. What I'm trying to do is make sure you get pretty close to landing that there. Get that wrong. But yeah, I'm going to bolt in the position trying to get you come pretty close though. So I've got a bolt started in the front corner here, and then I just use a extension and a thing to get a few threads in there. I'm not looking to tighten it right now, more like just get it in the right spot. So I'm just gonna go around, and you can see I'm still pretty far off down here. So I'm gonna do the other front, and then I'll come by with a jack, and I'll use the jack to lift the tail up. So this is why you don't want it swinging too much in the breeze. Is you want the car low, then you get a jack under it, and then help you line up these bolts. And then what I do is I got the front two in, because those are kind of the first two I get to. Just take a big screwdriver, like so, and just you can use it to center up the whole frame. See how it moves the whole chassis? Just get it right. Get your bolt, your gigantic washer. Let's get her started. And then again, I just use an extension, kind of like a huge nut driver. And use that to make sure it's threaded. And then I will usually also let down the jack just to make sure it's really got it. Sometimes it'll hook on the like the edge of the sheet metal and not be threaded in. If that's the case, it'll usually pop out as soon as you go to lower the subframe, but you can tell it's in there. So on this side, it's already pretty much up there, and it's got to do with my load leveler or whatever else. You know, it's not perfectly level, but same thing. This time I don't need the jack. Just kind of make your own jokes. Oh no, I might have lied. Oh no, I got it. Okay, and that's it. So now it's actually hanging from all four bolts. There's probably still some weight still on the, you can see that one's hardly threaded in. Some weight still on the engine hoist. That's kind of a good safety in case one of these drops out. I'm gonna go and cinch them up with the ratchet, a few more twists, and then also put in the inner rear subframe bolts. And then we can get into starting to put the transaxle back together and everything else, start hooking everything else up. So you can see it's most convenient to remove these inner fenders. You don't really need to do them all, I guess, but these are pretty beat up, so they only come out with a couple of sheet metal screws anyways. And it lets you line everything up. I take the bumper off because that's really easy. There's two bolts in the bumper support to hold it on, and then the rest is just kind of slide on clips. I'll show you that when I put it back together. So yeah, I'm gonna put these other bolts in. Okay, so I got all 6 lower bolts in it now, and I was able to disconnect the crane. And you want to start checking to make sure you got everything not pinched and routed correctly. So usually just start looking for things, making them sure they're loose. So get this up here. I pulled the trans gear selector out there, uncoiled the accelerator cable. You want to route this harness into this capture. But before you do that, you want to kind of make sure you got everything right up here where it should be. There's another one right here you want to I probably should have put it into before I pulled the engine up. Have to work that one in. And yeah, you just start de-luming everything and get it to lay down the right spot. Of particular note, you want to make sure you get these here. These are the fuel lines and the evaporative lines. You want to get those in place. There is a small 10mm up under here. See it there? Or that clamp's got to go. And then you make sure you didn't pinch your brand new brake lines. Looking good. So you want to make sure this is routed up. This isn't in the way. I got a clamp on that still. Make sure your AC line is free. That's why it helps to have the radiator out, obviously. I don't know if you can do it with it in it. It seems like it'd be impossible. It's way easier to just take the radiator out. Got the drippy twins down here. Gotta go up. Like that. And then you can see I gotta work on this. These cables aren't routed correctly, so I'll work on those. Make sure your AC line is up. Battery cables free. Ground cables free. Back here, this is the lower lines. Make sure they're not compressed. There's a vacuum line here. It goes down to that canister. It'll eventually connect up to, I think that, and then over to there if I'm not mistaken. I'll show you when it's done. And then yeah, you just want to make sure that everything back here is not pinch city. It is so tight back here. You can kind of see, I think there's a cable back there I probably should work to free up. Yeah, the O2 sensor's kind of pinched. Make that freed up. And then, yeah, I like to lay everything out. Get it all where it should be, routed wise, and then start plugging it in. Otherwise, you'll be plugging and unplugging stuff all day when you like, oh, this needs to fly over that, or this needs to go under there. So it's easier just to like lay it all in place, and then come back once you're sure everything's where you want it, and start fishing it through everything and snapping all the connectors together.